poppin', Kermit?
Hot. Well, then you need to give up the connect and let us handle them, B.
I'm out, Rico. You understand what I'm saying? Look at me.
Was your Uncle Johnny at the funeral?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Hey man, Preacher was there.
And Preacher was at the funeral too?
Yeah, he was.
What?
Yeah, he was.
These are just demons.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Almost had the gun. His man come out the room and put the gun to my forehead, and I watched him pull the trigger. And my spirit left the body, bro.
When people bring up Paid in Full, the names you always hear are Ace, Mitch, and Rico in real life. That meant Azie Faison, Rich Porter, and Alpo Martinez, three Harlem legends whose rise and downfall became street history.
What's poppin', Kermit?
I'm out, Rico. You understand what I'm saying? Look at me.
You need to give up the connect and let us handle them, B.
Look, man, we know it's hot on the streets, man. Believe me, man, we out there every day.
But their stories were only one side of the coin. Behind every hustle, every act of violence, and every betrayal were family, rivals, and enforcers with stories just as real and sometimes even crazier than what the movie showed. Let's get into it. In Paid in Full, he showed up as the character Ice, played by the late Ron Cephas Jones. On screen, Ice was that bitter, lurking presence in Mitch's household, the uncle who stayed quiet in the corner, smoked up his nephew's stash, and watched the cash pile up with envy in his eyes.
Money making Mitch. Come on, I'm broke, baby. I ain't got no money. I can smell them with money. Even Ray Charles can see you got money.
But in real life, Johnny Apple Porter and his story was way darker than anything the movie showed. Johnny was Velma Porter's brother, which made him the maternal uncle of Rich Porter and 12-year-old Donnell Porter. He wasn't just some distant relative. This was family, the same family that visited him in prison, sent him letters, and welcomed him back when he came home. Pat Porter, Rich and Donnell's sister, would even describe him as their favorite uncle. To the Porters, he was blood. But behind all those warm memories and family bonds, Johnny was watching Rich's rise with a twisted kind of jealousy. See, Rich wasn't just doing well, he was Harlem fly, with the cars, the jewelry, the clothes, and money that seemed endless. To his uncle, that lifestyle was too much to ignore. Instead of being happy for him, Johnny started feeling like he was owed a piece.
Johnny watched and saw the cars and the jewelry. Because now Ace started feeling like, is this a soft extortion? Like, why does grown man keep asking me for money?
Huh.
Like, you don't think you should go earn it somewhere? I could put you in a spot.
But instead of just asking Rich for help or finding a way to get on, he decided on something way darker. He came up with a plan to take it by force, and he didn't do it alone. Johnny linked up with the infamous Preacher crew, run by Clarence Preacher Headley. These guys were no ordinary stick-up team. They had a reputation for being brutal. Torture, murder, that was their playbook. Together, Johnny and the crew put together a plan that was as cold-blooded as it gets. Snap Johnny's own 12-year-old nephew, Donnell Porter, and extort $500,000 from Rich.
Apple was the one who brought that situation to my pops, right? And told him that it was easy for him to get the nephew because the nephew goes to school, you know what I'm saying, in the morning, such and such time, and pick him up. Apple told my father that he can get probably $500,000 from Rich. That was the thing there, you know what I'm saying?
What happened next is straight nightmare material. While the Porter family was panicking, searching, praying for Donnell's safe return, Johnny was right there in the middle of it, pretending to be the worried uncle. He played the role so well, it's chilling. When the mailed the family Donnell's severed finger, along with a cassette tape of the boy begging for his life, it was Pat Porter who grabbed the evidence and rushed to the police station. And the person who tried to stop her was Johnny. He argued, insisted they keep the cops out of it, saying they could handle it another way. But the reality was, he was trying to keep the truth buried. He even had the nerve to show up at Donnell's funeral with Preacher, standing shoulder to shoulder with the grieving family, mourning the very boy he had a hand in killing. That level of betrayal is almost impossible to wrap your head around.
Was your Uncle Johnny at the funeral?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Hey man, Preacher was there.
And Preacher was at the funeral too?
Yeah, he was.
What?
Yeah, he was.
These are just demons.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
For years, nobody knew the full truth. The case just sat there, one of those Harlem tragedies that people whispered about but couldn't piece together. It wasn't until the feds came down hard on Preacher Headley's crew for a laundry list of other crimes that things unraveled. Facing the rest of his life behind bars, Johnny did what so many in that game eventually do. He folded. He turned informant. During his plea negotiations, he finally admitted he'd helped set up the kidnapping and murder of Donnell. In return for cooperating, he was given a 30-year sentence. Pat Porter later came face to face with him and asked him directly, and he admitted it. His excuse was that Preacher's crew threatened his own son, so he went along. But for the Porters, no excuse could ever wash away that level of betrayal. This wasn't just some street beef or business gone wrong. This was family, an uncle they loved, trusted, and even looked up to. The same man who shared meals with them, who they wrote letters to in prison, was the one who sold out a 12-year-old boy for money he thought he was owed. Johnny Apple Porter was the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. In Paid in Full, he showed up as Calvin, played by Kevin Carroll. Calvin was that small-time hustler who couldn't stand to see his own friend shining brighter than him. On screen, he's bitter, envious, and willing to backstab just to level the playing field.
Yo, Calvin, man, why you doing this, man? I can tell that's you. Call that.
But in real life, the story behind Calvin is way messier and way deadlier. The truth starts with Kevin Clark. He wasn't just some random neighborhood rival trying to knock Azie Faison off his square. Clark was actually dating Azie's sister. That made him family, or at least close enough that Azie looked out for him like one. When Clark came home from doing a prison stretch, Azie didn't leave him stranded. He set him up heavy. He gave him a brand new convertible Saab, $15,000 cash in hand, and even a drug block that was moving a whole bird a week. That's a kilo of coke every 7 days. To most hustlers, that was a dream come true, a gift, a jumpstart. But the way Clark saw it, that wasn't a blessing. Azie would later say Clark's mentality was twisted. Instead of being grateful, Clark started thinking, damn, if he's setting me up like this, how much does he really got? That seed of envy grew into something poisonous.
There was 3 people. My sister's boyfriend at the time, he set me up, you understand? Try to rob me.
On August 22nd, 1987, all of that came to a head. Clark and his crew stormed into the Bronx apartment of Azie's aunt, which everybody knew was a stash spot. They came masked up, armed, and ready to take everything. But in the chaos, Azie caught a voice he recognized. He called out, "Kev, what you doing, man?" That one line changed everything.
Mask on his face, but I recognized the voice. It's my sister's boyfriend. Yo, Kev, what you doing? That's his name, Kev.
The whole room froze. Clark panicked, yanked his mask off, and the robbery instantly turned into a massacre. He screamed the order that sealed the fate of everyone inside. Gunfire ripped through the rooms. 25 shots in total. The aftermath was devastating. Azie's aunt, Myra Enoch, and 2 family friends, Joan Blue and Charles Parker, were murdered on the spot. 3 others were badly wounded, including a 13-year-old girl who somehow survived being shot twice in the head. Azie himself was hit 9 times. Twice in the head, bullets tearing through his body, shattering his leg. Another motive, according to Azie, stemmed from a situation that had happened before he even got deep into drug dealing. Kevin had once tried to use Azie as a middleman to get drugs to Rich Porter, but Azie didn't trust the setup. Something felt off. So instead of following through, he gave the drugs back to his sister and told her to return them to Kevin. That decision may have planted the seed of resentment.
And it was an incident where he wanted me to give, before he got locked up, he had wanted me to give some drugs to Rich. I gave it back to my sister, and I told him to give it back to him because I felt that dude was crazy, because the situation at that time, he was running from somebody.
In Paid in Full, the movie flips this into a story of street justice Alpo as Rico, tracking down Calvin and killing him for what he did. But that wasn't reality. In the real world, it was Azie himself who brought justice. Lying in a hospital bed at Lincoln Hospital, barely hanging on to life, detectives pressed him for answers, and he didn't hesitate. He named Kevin Clark, his sister's boyfriend, the man he had tried to put on as the shooter. Clark ran for a while, hiding out until he eventually turned himself in to authorities in Philadelphia. The courts didn't go easy on him. He was convicted and sentenced to a staggering 112 to 125 years to life in prison. But here's where things get even more layered. While Kevin Clark was the man who actually carried out that betrayal, the character of Calvin in Paid in Full wasn't just him. The filmmakers blended Clark's personal backstabbing with the legend of another Harlem Wolf, Henry RonDu Bolden. RonDu was different. He wasn't looking to build empires like Azie or Fat Cat Nichols. He made his name by tearing empires down. With his cousin, he earned the title Godfathers of Crib Robberies, robbing major drug dealers in their own strongholds, something most people wouldn't dare to attempt. He didn't care how dangerous the target was. He robbed Azie. He even dared to cross Fat Cat, who was one of the most feared names in New York at the time. RonDu wasn't a strategist. He wasn't looking for longevity. He lived job to job, score to score, taking what he could with no regard for tomorrow.
They pushed their way inside. They rounded up 6 friends, one of them a 13-year-old girl. They shoved them back into a rear bedroom, made them lie on the floor, and then pumped 25 shots into the backs of their heads and bodies. Odds are Henry Bolden and Ronald Simmons will never set foot on a city street again. The brazen killers were sentenced to 112 years to life for the execution-style murders of 3 and the shooting of 3 other Bronx people.
That's the spirit that Calvin represents on screen. He's not some mastermind. He's an opportunist, an insider who uses his connection to make one violent move for a quick score. By folding RonDu's ruthless rep into Kevin Clark's betrayal, the filmmakers created a character that summed up one of the scariest truths of the drug game. Betrayal doesn't always come from your enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people closest to you, or from wolves who never cared about you to begin with. In Paid in Full, his story came through the eyes of Ace, played with that cool, simmering intensity by Wood Harris. Ace wasn't the loudest, flashiest, or most ruthless character, but he was the architect, the thinker, the quiet one pulling strings while the others flexed. And that was exactly who Azie Faison was in real life.
I've been shot in the head, baby. My body different.
Azie was born on November 10th, 1964 in the Bronx. Life didn't hand him much from the jump. When he was just 6 years old, tragedy struck. A fire destroyed his family's apartment, and they had to pack up and move to Harlem's Sugar Hill. That meant 9 people, Azie, his parents, and his 7 siblings, all crammed into a 1-bedroom apartment. They survived on public assistance, and for young Azie, it always felt like the world was stacked against him. School wasn't his lane. He dropped out in the 9th grade and picked up work at Junior's Dry Cleaners. The pay was $75 a week for long hours. Not exactly the kind of money that could lift his family out of poverty.
I felt if I worked full-time, I'll make more money. You feel me? But my salary never changed. I still got $75 a week. And that's all I ever made in that cleaners for $75 a week.
Then came the movie that lit a fire in his spirit, Scarface. When it dropped in 1983, it didn't just inspire Azie, it inspired a whole generation of hustlers. Tony Montana, rising from nothing to build an empire, resonated deeply. For Azie, sitting in that theater, he saw a reflection of himself, a kid from the bottom who wanted more. He walked out feeling like Tony's ambition was his blueprint. Life soon handed him an opening. While working at the cleaners, a Dominican customer named Lulu, who would eventually become his supplier, left cocaine in his pants pocket. Most people would have flipped it for themselves. Azie gave it back. That honesty impressed Lulu, who then told him to keep it. That single gesture changed everything. Azie didn't just sell the coke, he flipped it with what he later called an accidental stroke of genius. At the time, half grams were moving for $100. Azie cut that price in half, sold them for $50, and word spread like wildfire. Suddenly, everybody wanted what Azie was selling. Practically overnight, he went from folding shirts at the cleaners to being Harlem's newest name in the streets.
I met Lulu, and then he gave me some work. I took it to the streets, and next thing you know, I'm in the game, bro. I'm in the game. Overnight success.
The money came quick, and Azie wasn't reckless with it. He built systems. First came the Green Door, an after-hours club pulling in over $50,000 a week. But his real masterpiece was the jukebox. On the surface, it was just a storefront filled with arcade machines, a place for kids. In reality, it was one of the slickest drug fronts Harlem had ever seen. He pushed his signature $10 vials, GP35s, through the spot and stashed money inside the game machines. The operation was so clean it pulled in hundreds of thousands every week. Harlem had seen hustlers, but Azie was on a whole other level. With his rep building, he crossed paths with a young hustler out of East Harlem, Alpo Martinez. They met after a basketball game at Rucker Park. Azie wasn't quick to trust. He didn't like outsiders in his circle. At the time, his right-hand man, Rich Porter, was locked up in the Bronx House Detention Center, so Azie reached out to Rich, asked for his read on Alpo. Rich vouched for him, and that was all it took. The trio was born: Azie, Rich, and Alpo, the holy trinity of Harlem hustlers. Rich and Alpo played the flashy role: Dapper Dan outfits, BMWs, jewelry, the full Harlem superstar look. Azie stayed in the shadows, the chess player while the others played checkers. He thought long-term, structured moves. But in the game, blessings always come with curses. On August 21st, 1987, Azie faced his darkest moment. His stash spot, an apartment belonging to his aunt, Joan Blue, was hit. But it wasn't just a robbery, it was a massacre. His sister's boyfriend, Kevin Clark, led the attack. 6 people were shot point blank, 3 were killed, including his aunt. Azie himself was hit 9 times, 2 bullets tearing through his head. His leg shattered. He should have been dead. Miraculously, he survived. Azie later said he felt his spirit leave his body that night.
His man come out the room and put the gun to my forehead, and I watched him pull the trigger. And my spirit left the body, bro.
That brush with death, along with the 1990 murder of his partner, Rich Porter, was enough to push him out of the game for good. From his hospital bed, detectives pressed him, and he identified Kevin Clark as the shooter. That decision created one of the most stubborn labels that's followed him ever since: the snitch tag. But Azie pushed back on that idea. He didn't testify to avoid prison. He wasn't cooperating against his partners. He named the man who tried to wipe out his family. His lawyer even secured him immunity for any past drug activities, meaning whatever he had done before couldn't be held against him. To Azie, there was a huge difference between that and being an informant like Alpo.
Ultimately, the guys get caught. You end up taking the stand in the trial?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And
Yes,
then
sir.
the surviving people in the room also take the stand, right?
Yes, sir.
After leaving the streets, Azie shifted his energy into storytelling. In 1989, he formed Mob Style, one of the first hip-hop groups to openly mix hustler life with conscious rap. He wrote the original screenplay for what later became Paid in Full, initially calling it Trapped. He dropped his autobiography, Game Over, to set the record straight. And he's been outspoken about how the movie twisted his story, glorifying the lifestyle instead of warning against it, and making him look like a snitch. Today, his mission is clear: to stop the next generation from making the same mistakes. His most powerful warning sums it all up: don't try to repeat Paid in Full the way we repeated Scarface. In Paid in Full, he's not there, not a face, not a name, but if you know the story, you know his shadow looms large. Wayne "Silk" Perry was the ghost of the film, the reason Alpo transformed from a flashy Harlem enforcer into a cold-blooded kingpin with national reach. Some even argue that without Wayne Perry, there wouldn't even be a Paid in Full story to tell. Wayne Anthony Perry was born November 14, 1962 in Washington, D.C. He grew up in Southwest on L Street in the 203 neighborhood, one of the roughest parts of town. His nickname Silk came from family, a nod to his smooth way with words. But behind the charm was a violent streak that became legendary. His criminal career started almost unbelievably early. By 12, he allegedly committed his first murder in 1974. By 16, he was robbing banks. His high school years didn't last. After a fight with his baseball coach at Wilson High, Perry beat him unconscious with a bat. That got him barred from every DC public school. His reputation only grew darker. In 1984, a gang tried to jump him on a corner. corner. Perry fought back, beating one of them to death with a bat right in front of police. Because he was jumped first, the charge dropped to manslaughter, and he only served a few years in Lorton's Youth Center 1, a prison known for breeding even more violence. When he got out in 1987, Silk wasn't the same. He was a full-time hitman now, with a signature method: no drive-bys, no spray and pray. He walked right up to his targets and put bullets in their heads, often multiple shots to make sure it was done. He was so feared that dealers paid him tribute just to stay off his radar. Some wouldn't even wear flashy jewelry around him, scared it might spark envy.
This guy, Wayne Perry, was considered the Michael Jordan of the murder game.
Wayne Perry was one of our most prolific killers in D.C.
His path crossed with Alpo Martinez in 1989. At the time, Alpo was new in D.C. and had already been shot, barely surviving. He needed muscle. The introduction came through a 15-year-old killer, Shelton "Shorty Pop" Watkins, from the go-go group Junkyard Band. Perry was locked up on an attempted murder charge. Bail set at $10,000. Alpo paid it in full. Just like that, their bond was set. Alpo had the drugs and money. Wayne had the power and violence. Together, they ruled DC with blood. Perry handled Alpo's problems directly. Any rival, any threat, any disrespect. When Alpo wanted revenge on the men who shot him, Perry took care of it. When Alpo's rival Matthew Blake appeared, Shorty Pop executed him in December 1989 on Alpo's orders. One of their most infamous crimes involved silencing a witness. Alveda Hopkins had agreed to testify against Perry for killing James "Frog" Henson. That was enough to mark her. Perry and Alpo Alpo drove their infamous murder van, blasting NWA's "AB is AB" while Perry stabbed Hopkins multiple times before shooting her in the head. It didn't stop there. When Brooklyn Kingpin Demencio Benson disrespected Alpo, they set him up after a basketball game at Kennedy Park. Hundreds of people were there. Alpo gave Shorty Pop the nod, and he walked up and shot Benson in the forehead in broad daylight. Nobody spoke to the cops.
This kid had DC in fear. I mean, this kid just didn't care. He was murdering everything that was moving.
When Poe hooked up with Wayne, that was the best thing that happened to Poe.
Perry's brutality was legendary even among killers. In one story, he told an underling, Thomas Dozier, to kill a young woman named Evelyn Carter simply for rejecting his advances. Dozier shot her twice in the chest, came back to report the job. Perry was furious. To prove his point, Perry walked up to a random man talking on a payphone and shot him in the head. "That's how you kill somebody," he said. Their reign ended in 1991. Alpo was arrested on November 7th, facing the death penalty for 14 murders. The feds had him cornered, and he flipped. He became a federal informant. But the man the government wanted most was Wayne Perry. Alpo gave them everything: dates, names, details. With Alpo's testimony, Perry was convicted and hit with 5 consecutive life sentences. No parole. He's now locked away in ADX Florence, the Supermax prison in Colorado. In later years, during an interview with FBI agent Dan Riley, Perry admitted the real number of murders he committed was over 100. He has since converted to Islam, now going by Nkosi Shaka Zulu L. In Paid in Full, he shows up as Mitch, the smooth-talking, flashy hustler played by Harlem's own Makey Pfeiffer. But the real-life Rich Porter wasn't just a character on screen. In Harlem, he was the guy everybody wanted to be like. To the streets, he was money rich, a legend in motion.
You know what, man? I think I need to go out tonight, man. All right? Meet me at the top. We're gonna party for real.
Richard Thomas Porter was born on July 26th, 1965, right in Harlem. He was the oldest of 3 kids raised by his mom, Velma. He had a younger sister, Patricia, and a younger brother, William Donnell. Compared to a lot of kids coming up in Harlem during the 70s, Rich's home life was fairly stable, but the streets were always right there, whispering, pulling him in. By most accounts, Rich had his hands in the game early. Azie Faison, his lifelong friend, swore Rich was hustling heroin by the age of 12. Others say he started with smaller hustles, selling sage and eggs to white kids from Jersey and calling it hash, or moving joints for $1 a piece.
Rich Porter actually started selling initially at age 12. So that was like around 1977.
However it started, by 16 he was already making big moves. That year, he pulled up in a brand new black BMW 528e, all black everything. That was the thing about Rich. He wasn't just a hustler, he was an icon. He embodied Harlem style. Police would later downplay it, calling him a mid-level crack dealer who made about $50,000 a week. But the streets knew better. They said that number was laughably low. Rich was everywhere, never wearing the same outfit twice, keeping over a dozen luxury cars tucked away in a Manhattan garage, dripping in Dapper Dan fits. Him and Alpo were basically Dapper Dan's unofficial models, rocking the type of looks that rappers like LL Cool J would bite later on. But behind the cars, the fashion, and the glow, tragedy was waiting. And it didn't come from a rival on the street, it came from his own bloodline. On December 5th, 1989, Rich's 12-year-old brother Donnell left home for school. It was just a short walk, 4 blocks. He never made it. The kid was snatched off the street, and the family got a phone call demanding $500,000 for his return. The kidnappers wanted $500,000, then dropped it to $350,000 to show they weren't playing. They had the family go to a McDonald's on 125th and Broadway. There, inside a coffee cup, was Donnell's severed finger, one of his rings, and a cassette tape. On the tape was Donnell's voice, scared, pleading, "They cutted my finger off. Please help me. Get the money. I love you, mommy. Tell Pat I love her."
And they wanted how much? Like $500,000 or something?
Yeah, that's what it was stated to that band.
And then to show that they were serious, they actually cut off his little brother's
The very
finger.
next day. But they didn't send it to him, but they left it in a McDonald's on Broadway in 125th Street and called his house and said there's something to go look, and he sent somebody over there, and that's what they came back with.
It was the kind of cruelty that even Harlem, a place numb to violence, couldn't shake. But what the family didn't know at first was the darkest part. This whole thing was orchestrated by their own uncle, Johnny Apple Porter. Pat, Rich's sister, would later say that when she ran to call the police after they got the finger, it was Johnny who was in the house trying to stop her. Rich, desperate to save his little brother, went to his supplier, Richard Fritz Simmons, Harlem's infamous cocaine consignment king. Fritz fronted him 30 kilos to help raise the ransom, but Rich was under the gun. Cops were circling, the feds were on high alert, and time was running out. He turned to the one person he thought he could count on, Alpo Martinez. That decision cost him his life. On January 3rd, 1990, Alpo lured Rich into a van with his associate Big Head Gary. Convinced that Rich had been overcharging him on coke prices, Alpo gave the nod. Rich was shot in the head and chest, his body dumped near Orchard Beach in the Bronx. He was just 24 years old. When his body was found, he still had $2,239 cash in his pocket. Azie Faison remembered seeing Alpo that night, scratches on his face.
Alpo gets out with his man, I guess that was Gary. Shake hands. I'm like, damn, what happened to your face, bro? Scratches on his face. He said, nah, my girl out in DC, she's bugging out. I said, damn, them shits look fresh, man.
And the next morning, when word spread that Rich had been killed, Alpo pulled up, shed a couple tears in front of the crowd, then drove off like nothing happened. He even had the audacity to show up at Rich's wake, signing his name in huge bold letters in the guest book. Years later, Alpo would casually admit to the murder. It wasn't personal, it was business. With Rich gone, the kidnappers knew the ransom was never coming. They killed Donnell too, beating him to death and leaving his body less than a mile from where they dumped his brother. The story of Rich Porter is short, tragic, and brutal, but his legacy never faded. Harlem still speaks his name with reverence, and hip-hop immortalized him. Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Meek Mill, The Game. Rappers from every generation have dropped his name in verses. To this day, the Prince of Harlem lives on in legend. In Paid in Full, Lulu shows up as the slick Colombian supplier played by Isai Morales, the guy who changes Ace's life with a single bag of coke found in a pair of pants. It makes for a clean cinematic moment, but the real Lulu's story was deeper, riskier, and in a lot of ways, way more telling about how the drug game actually worked.
How much is worth? 25,000. Damn. No, damn, that's damn good, okay?
The real Lulu wasn't just a faceless connect. Some say he was Colombian, others say Dominican, but everyone agrees he was plugged in. And yes, the dry cleaner story is true. Azie Faison really did find cocaine in his clothes and return it. That honesty gave Lulu confidence in him, but Azie himself later said their first real meeting wasn't at the cleaners. It was at a pool hall on 157th Street.
But I found some shit in his pocket and I gave it back to him. He's like, nah, keep that. And then one thing led to the next. I took that to the streets and that's how we became connected, bro.
From that moment on, Lulu wasn't just a supplier, he was the connect. He was giving Azie bricks of top-notch fish scale, stamped with a scorpion. The quality was unbeatable, the price ridiculous. While others were paying way more, Lulu fronted Azie work for as low as $13,000 a kilo. And the key part was, it was all on consignment, no upfront cash. That meant Azie could flood Harlem with coke without risking $1 of his own money. It was like Lulu handed him the cheat code.
And he has some crazy connect where he has as many kilos as he needs.
Get what you? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And unlike the distant, shadowy figure the movie shows, the real Lulu was surprisingly loyal, almost to the point of recklessness. When Azie got shot 9 times in the 1987 robbery, Lulu went to visit him at Lincoln Hospital. That was no small thing. To visit Azie, you had to first walk into the precinct, get fingerprinted, get photographed, and put yourself on the cops' radar. For a major supplier to do that was unheard of. It showed the level of respect and trust he had for Azie. But the game always eats its own. Not long after Azie was released from the hospital, Lulu visited him at his mom's house. He told Azie he was making one last big move, then he was out. He wanted to walk away clean. Azie believes that was the mistake that killed him. Lulu was about to receive a massive shipment, maybe 100 keys. He let a subordinate in on the plan. That subordinate saw the chance of a lifetime, murdered Lulu, and took over his empire. Unlike the movie, where Lulu's death happens early, in reality, it came after Azie's shooting. It was another domino falling in the collapse of Harlem's biggest empire. In Paid in Full, the most desperate moment comes when Mitch needs $500,000 to save his little brother. In the movie, it's Ace who steps in with the product. But in real life, that lifeline didn't come from Ace at all. It came from Richard Fritz Simmons. Fritz was born October 8, 1957, down in Charleston, South Carolina. Like a lot of families in the 1970s, his people made their way north, chasing opportunity in New York City. They ended up in Harlem on West 112th Street. Harlem at the time was two things at once. It was a cultural mecca, but it was also drowning in heroin, crime, and poverty. And for a kid like Fritz, the streets were going to decide his destiny. His introduction into the game came through someone you might not expect, a nurse. But this wasn't just any nurse. She was known on the block as Queen Bee, a woman who ran a heroin operation right out of the same building Fritz lived in. She took him under her wing, showed him how the game worked, and the kid picked it up fast. Under Queen Bee's guidance, Fritz went from rookie to earner, moving so much heroin that he was pulling in up to $60,000 a week. But every partnership in the streets has an expiration date. Queen Bee eventually fell victim to the same poison she sold, cocaine addiction. That cracked their bond, and Fritz branched off on his own. His independence didn't come without scars. At one point, in a beef over a bad batch of product, Fritz was shot 5 times. But instead of ending his career, that near-death moment was the turning point. After he healed up, he did something almost nobody else in Harlem had. He locked in a direct line to the Medellin cartel. That changed everything. Fritz didn't just become another dealer, he became the dealer. His brilliance wasn't just in what he sold, but how he sold it. They called him the consignment king for a reason. See, most suppliers demanded cash up front. You pay before you play. But Fritz flipped the script. He would front kilos, letting hustlers move the product first and pay him back later. That was risky, but Fritz was sharp, and he knew how to read people. The gamble worked, and it made him indispensable. Dealers across all 5 boroughs, and even in surrounding states, trusted him.
First started you out, what did he give you?
He gave me and Kevin about maybe 4 or 5 ounces of this was some of the best I ever touched.
At his height, Fritz was moving anywhere from 300 to 500 kilos a month. That's cartel level weight. And he was supplying the biggest names Harlem had ever produced: Rich Porter, Azie Faison, Alpo Martinez. But while his clients lived loud, Fritz moved in complete silence. He was the ghost in the machine. He never wanted the spotlight. While Alpo was flossing and Rich was dripping in Dapper Dan, Fritz was still driving around in a modest Nissan Maxima, still living in that same small apartment on 112th Street. His half-sister Sheila Harrison would later say, "If you pulled up on the block with a flashy car, Fritz or one of his guys would tell you to move it." And it wasn't just about survival, it was about who Fritz was. For all his power, he never stopped being a neighborhood guy. He was known for giving back. He looked out for struggling families, helped with rent, groceries, back-to-school clothes. People saw him as a kind of Robin Hood, quiet, generous, and disciplined. He was respected in a way few dealers ever were, because he didn't need to scream his status. He let his actions speak. Of course, Harlem wasn't short on wolves. Predatory crews like the Wild Cowboys came after him and his people multiple times. They never got him, but the violence hit close. His right-hand man, Charles Chucky Kane, wasn't so lucky. Chucky was murdered after Fritz himself escaped a kidnapping attempt. It was a reminder that no matter how smart you played it, the streets always found a way to bite. And then, just like that, Fritz's reign ended, not in a blaze of bullets, but in silence. In 1991, at only 33 years old, he was gone. To this day, the exact cause of his death is murky. Some reports say he contracted HIV from a blood transfusion after being hospitalized for a gunshot wound. Others, including his sister Evelyn Simmons, insist he was poisoned. Nobody can say for sure. What is certain is this: in over a decade of being Harlem's quiet kingmaker, Richard Fritz Simmons was never arrested. In Paid in Full, the character that stole the show was Rico. Played by Harlem rapper Cameron in his acting debut, Rico was the one everybody remembered when the credits rolled. Flashy, reckless, unpredictable, and absolutely ruthless. Rico embodied the type of hustler who'd do whatever it took to stay on top. That energy was pulled straight from the real-life figure, Alberto Alpo Martinez.
Hey, get shot every day, B. You be aight. You tough, right?
Alpo's story starts far from the glitz and glamour. Born on June 8, 1966, in East Harlem, better known as Spanish Harlem, he grew up in the East River housing projects. His father wasn't around, so his mother raised him and tried her best to keep him out of the streets. She signed him up for the Boys and Girls Club, sent him away summers with the Fresh Air Fund to live with a suburban family, the Clintons, who remembered him as this polite, likable kid. For a while, he even walked around in a cadet uniform, dreaming of becoming a Marine. On paper, you'd think he had a chance to take a different path, but Harlem's pull was strong. By his early teens, Alpo was already running the streets, doing petty crimes to get money. One of his first hustles was tossing trash cans onto the FDR Drive to cause traffic jams, then robbing stuck drivers. At 13, he graduated to the heroin game, working under a local dealer named Petaway. By 15, he was already feared as a stick-up kid under the wing of a hardened hustler named Randy Love. Alpo was Puerto Rican, but his complexion had people mistaking him for black, something he used to his advantage. He'd slip into Dominican or Colombian drug houses, pretend he didn't understand Spanish, then sit back, listen, and scout out the perfect time to rob them. The hunger was always there. He wasn't shy about wanting more. When Rich Porter got locked up, Alpo saw an opening and approached Azie Faison at Rucker Park, asking to get put on. Rich vouched for him from prison, and Azie gave him a shot.
He was behind me. I get out the car, he get off the bike, he greet me, say, "Yo, I'm Alpo." I said, "What's good, bro?" He said, "Yo, I used to work with Rich, man, before, he got locked up, man. I'm just trying to see if me and you could get together." And Rich gonna call me. He called me every morning. When he called me, I asked him, "What's good?" And if he say, "Let's go," no problem, we can make something happen, bro. Rich called me the next day. I said, "Yo, your man, the dude named Al." He said, yeah, it's my man. Look out for him.
At first, he had to prove himself, breaking down bricks into vials, showing loyalty and discipline. But Alpo had bigger dreams. He climbed fast. Azie came to trust him enough to let him handle the stash house. making him both muscle and manager. His big break came when Azie moved his operation from the jukebox on 145th Street because it got too hot. None of Azie's lieutenants wanted the spot. It was considered a liability. Alpo, on the other hand, saw it as a jackpot waiting to be claimed. He took it, stacked his own crew, and made sure everybody knew it was his. To send a message, he reportedly killed 2 stick-up kids who thought they could rob the place. With that, Alpo wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was officially a boss. When Rich Porter got out of prison, he and Alpo clicked instantly. They became inseparable, like brothers. The three represented different hustling philosophies. Azie stayed low-key, Rich was the stylish superstar, and Alpo was the wild card, charming but terrifying. He could turn on you in a second. He'd humiliate smaller dealers, shoot at Petaway's feet when the man asked for money, and once nearly tossed his own crew member out of a second-story window for stealing. By 1988, Alpo wanted more than Harlem. When DC kingpin Rayful Edmond fell, it left a power vacuum in the nation's capital. Alpo rushed in to fill it, but DC wasn't Harlem. It was even more violent, even more cutthroat. He learned that lesson firsthand in 1989 when he was set up and shot, nearly killed. That brush with death made him seek out serious muscle, and nobody was scarier in DC than Wayne Silk Perry. Perry was sitting in jail on a $10,000 bail, but Alpo dropped the cash without hesitation. That was the start of a partnership built on fear. With Perry by his side, Alpo had the ultimate enforcer, a man willing to kill witnesses, rivals, or anyone who got in the way. But the streets have a way of making brothers into enemies. Alpo eventually grew suspicious of Rich Porter. He convinced himself Rich was overcharging him on coke prices and lying about his suppliers. Then came the tragedy that changed everything. Rich's 12-year-old brother Donnell was in desperation. Rich took 30 kilos on consignment from Fritz Simmons and went to Alpo for help moving it. Instead of helping, Alpo set him up. On January 3rd, 1990, Alpo and his associate Garrett Big Head Gary picked Rich up in a van. Alpo pressed him about the supposed lies. When Rich denied it, Alpo gave Gary the nod. 2 bullets dropped Rich. But when they went to move his body, Rich let out a sound. Shocked, Alpo grabbed the gun and finished the job with a shot to the head. He dumped Rich's body near Orchard Beach, then had the audacity to show up at the wake and sign his name in the guest book in big, bold letters.
I was asking him like, yo, Rich, where did you get that coke from, man? That was good, because I wanted to make him comfortable. That was good as a He's like, I got it from my connect. From there, I knew he was lying. I turned to my little man. I gave him the nod. Once I gave him the nod, my little man spent, because he was short so he could stand up in the van. Next thing you heard was the 2 gunshots, bang, bang.
By 1991, the law finally caught up. The FBI arrested him in DC on November 7th, facing 14 murder charges and the possibility of the death penalty. And that's when Alpo made the move that forever stained his name. He flipped. He became a federal informant, with his most devastating testimony aimed at none other than Wayne Perry, his former right-hand man. Perry was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms, while Alpo walked away with just 35 years. After 25 years, Alpo got out in 2015 under witness protection, living in Maine as Abraham Rodriguez. But Alpo couldn't sit still. By 2017, he had ditched protection, back in Harlem, back on social media, back in the spotlight. He gave interviews, rode bikes, and tried to rebrand himself, insisting he wasn't just a snitch, but a survivor who made the smartest move possible. But Harlem never forgets. On Halloween night, 2021, Alpo was behind the wheel of his Dodge Ram truck when bullets ripped through it. At 55 years old, his story ended violently on the same streets where it began, but the motive shocked everyone. It wasn't some long-awaited revenge. According to police, it was a petty road rage beef with a 27-year-old named Shaquem Parker, who felt disrespected when Alpo brushed past him on a motorcycle. Parker was arrested, but later acquitted in July 2024, leaving Alpo's murder as murky as much of his life.